Welcome to the Wealthy Trustee webinar. In this 90-minute interactive webinar, I am going to teach you how to build wealth the right way. So who am I? I am going to be your instructor for today. My name is Christina Yvette, and I am the founder of 7 Ways to Wealth. So a little backstory about me. I was a nurse for 8 years, and in my 2nd year of nursing, I knew that there was something else that I had to do in order to get time freedom, location freedom, and financial freedom. So what I did was I opened up a real estate investment firm, and I saved up $25,000 from my paycheck, and I was able to put down on a $85,000 house. So I got into real estate investing, and of course I had a mentor, and my mentor told me to purchase that property with a trust. So at that time, my mentor had $200 million worth of property. So I knew that I had to follow the right steps in order to acquire that type of wealth. So I set up a trust, and I put that property into a trust because I wanted to protect my assets. I was young, I was 25, I was a woman, and I didn't want anyone to, 1, take advantage of me, or 2, be able to take my property away, especially because it was gonna go through renovations, and anything can happen during renovations, right? A contractor can step on a nail, somebody can get hit in the head, you never know. And so I wasn't gonna wait until I got sued in order to protect my assets. And you shouldn't wait until you get sued in order to protect your assets. So I have been a trustee since 2015, and I am a trust specialist that has helped hundreds of people set up trust, set them up the right way, and be structured so that they can protect their assets and their growing wealth. And today what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do the same thing. But I have a quick disclaimer before we get started. My disclaimer is that I'm not a licensed attorney or a tax professional. So this is not tax advice or legal advice. I am a trustee. I've been a trustee for years, and what I'm going to do is show you how to become a trustee. So in this webinar, what you're going to learn is what it takes in order to set up a trust. You're going to learn the different contributors to a trust, how to operate the trust, how to build wealth with the trust, some tax saving strategies that you can use with the trust, and how to protect your assets. So let's dive into the webinar. So you see these different companies. We are familiar with the Trump organization with Donald Trump. We're familiar with the Berkshire Hathaway organization with Warren Buffett. And we're familiar with Amazon with Jeff Bezos. So how is it that these billion-dollar organizations pay little to no taxes? Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. The reason that they're able to do that, right? We've heard Donald Trump say when he was the president that he doesn't pay taxes because he's smart. We heard Warren Buffett say that he pays less taxes than his secretary. So the reason why is because they're structured the right way, because they have incorporated trust within their structure to be able to reduce their tax liability to almost zero, if not zero. So that's what you need to do. You need to treat your family and your organization like a billion-dollar organization and do what the billionaires do. Incorporate a trust within your structure. Now, let me let you in on another secret. You see this $1 bill in front of you. Do you see the word trust on the $1 bill? I know that your answer is yes. You see the words, "In God we trust." A lot of people think that that's just a phrase on a dollar bill. But in all actuality, It is the name of the trust that the United States of America uses. So the United States of America is actually a corporation, and they also utilize trust within their structure. So if the United States of America is utilizing trust, do you think that you should also be utilizing trust? Absolutely. So what is the big question? Well, what is a trust? A lot of people have heard the word trust being thrown around there in society, and they're unfamiliar with what it really is. So let's dive in. A trust is an entity. It is a contract, just like any other type of contract. This contract has three parties involved. It has a grantor, which is the person who has established or created the trust. So typically the grantor is the person who, one, creates the trust, and two, is funding the trust. The second party involved is the trustee. The trustee is the controller of the trust. That is the individual that we call the fiduciary, because they are the individuals that, one, represent the trust, and two, run the day-to-day operations of the trust. And the last party involved is the beneficiary. The beneficiary is the inheritor of the trust, or the individual that is going to receive the assets once the trust is terminated. So those are the three parties that are a part of this trust contract, okay? So there's several different parts to the contract. So the first section is the declaration of the contract. And in that section, you are going to be declaring what this contract is and what it is not. So you have to actually specify what type of contract it is, okay? So you're going to specify that it is a trust and what type of trust, either revocable or irrevocable, okay? And then once you're done declaring what it is, you're going to declare what it is not. So it is not like the other entities. It is not a joint venture. It is not a corporation. It is not a limited liability company. So once you have established your declaration of contract, then you're going to dive into your indenture. Those are the sections and provisions that you are going to put in place to let the trustee know how to operate the trust for the benefit of the beneficiaries. And once your contract is solidified, then you're going to legalize it. So that is what a trust entity is. It is an entity just like you. We are not aware that we're humans, but we're also entities. And so with a trust, it doesn't have any limitations on what it can and cannot do. It can actually do everything that a natural person can do. So if you can build credit, a trust can build credit. If you can buy a home, a trust can buy a home. If you can write a book, a trust can also write a book. So there's no limitations on what a trust entity can do. Now that we know what a trust is, let's talk about the different types of trust. So there are hundreds of types of trust. You have living trust, land trust, revocable, irrevocable, testamentary, charity trust. There's so many types of trust. So how do you know which type of trust to get? First of all, let's go through the different categories of trust so that you're able to make an informed decision. The first type of category that I want to discuss is express versus implied. With this type of category, a implied trust is a trust that is oral. You can have an oral contract, which means that you can have an oral trust. So that means that the grantor or the creator of the trust is going to orally tell the trustee the different provisions that they want the trustee to carry out for the oral trust. The trustee will then be able to record that information and go out and carry out the oral trust. An oral contract is definitely not the way to go because it can't be proven that it actually exists. Only if those two individuals, which is the grantor and the trustee, both agree that it does exist. The next category is express. An express trust is a written trust. It is a trust that is in black and white on an actual contract style. So it's on paper, which means that it can actually be proven to exist. So if you were to determine or choose one of the two from an express trust and an implied trust, I would recommend that you choose to create an express trust. The next category that I want to tell you guys about is simple versus complex. So with a simple trust, it's usually shorter in nature, so it's a smaller type of contract or trust, right? A trust can be as little as 1 page. And with a simple trust, you have to actually do a distribution to the beneficiaries. Now, with a complex trust, it's usually longer in nature, so it has more sections and provisions, and it is optional if the trustee actually wants to issue out a distribution to the beneficiaries. So if you were to choose from a simple trust versus a complex trust, I would tell you to choose a complex trust. Next category is a statutory versus non-statutory. So with a statutory trust, you are actually going to be setting up a trust that can only be used in the state where it was established. That is what we are referring to when we talk about statutory. So with a state, it has state codes and statutes that are part of that legal system. And so the trust that you would be setting up that is a statutory trust is going to have the state statutes and codes embedded in the actual trust indenture. So that means that the state has jurisdiction over that trust and that it can actually regulate the trust. With a statutory trust, it's usually documented or recorded in the county or in the Secretary of State. So unfortunately, it's a part of the public records. People are actually going to be able to know that that trust does exist. A statutory trust is usually set up by an attorney, and because it can be regulated by the state, any court system, if it were to end up in litigation, can actually carry out a lawsuit for that statutory trust. On the contrary, you have a non-statutory trust, which means that the jurisdiction is outside of the state where it was established, because a non-statutory trust operates under the common law legal system jurisdiction. With that being said, almost all states have a common law legal system. So that is the jurisdiction that your non-statutory trust is going to fall within, which means that the state cannot regulate your trust. Your trust is actually going to be private because it's not going to be recorded in the public records through the county or the state. And because it operates under common law, it can operate in all 50 states and all U.S. territories versus just only being restricted to operate in the state where it was established, like a statutory trust is restricted by. So with a non-statutory trust, you do get that privacy that you are looking for. And because it's operating under common law, if that type of trust was to end up in litigation, it would have to be seen or carried out by a competent court system. And usually the court systems within your state are not competent enough to carry out a judgment for a common law non-statutory trust. So it would have to go through the Supreme Court in order to carry out that lawsuit. So if you were to ask me which type of trust do you recommend from those two categories, I would tell you that I recommend that you set up a non-statutory trust. The next category is revocable versus irrevocable. With a revocable trust, the grantor has what we call revocability, meaning that the grantor, or the person who has established the trust, is able to revoke property back from the trust. They're able to revoke or terminate the trust. They are able to revoke positions, meaning remove the trustees and the beneficiaries from the trust, and they're able to make amendments to the trust. Because that type of trust is revocable and the creator is able to make amendments, it is not seen as the safest type of trust to have, because if that trust were to end up in litigation, it would actually be able to be pierced because it can be changed by the person who created it. On the contrary, if you have an irrevocable trust, that means that the grantor has irrevocability. So what is irrevocability? Well, that means that the creator of the trust is unable to revoke property back from the trust. So if they were to put property into the trust, they can't take it back. And that property would need to be sold back by the trustee. They also cannot make any amendments to the trust. They cannot remove trustees or beneficiaries, and they cannot terminate the trust. So revocability and irrevocability only applies to the grantor. With an irrevocable trust, because it cannot be changed by the person who created it, which is the grantor, it is seen as a bulletproof trust, because if it were to end up in litigation, it would not be pierced. And if a trust is pierced, that means that you would have to produce the trust in court. And that is not what you want to do, because then your trust is no longer private. It will be a part of the public records. So now that you know the different types of trust, let's dive into how to actually create a trust. So step one, you are going to determine what type of trust you want to create. So we just went through several different categories of trust that you have to think about that you actually want to create. So the best type of trust for you to create is a trust that is an express trust, that is a complex trust, that is a non-statutory common law trust, and that is an irrevocable trust. That is what we consider the bulletproof trust. And that's the trust that you want to set up. So now that you've determined what type of trust that you want to set up, you have to now choose a name for that trust. So what are you going to name it? Well, when you're considering naming the trust, the first thing that I want you to avoid is naming the trust after yourself. Please don't do that, because we are actually intentionally trying to maintain privacy and obscurity. So we don't want people to know that we are associated with the trust. So if your name is John Doe, you are not going to name your trust John Doe Trust, okay? So first and foremost, do not name the trust after yourself. Secondly, you do not have to have the word trust in the name of your trust. It's an entity. You can call it whatever you want. So just keep that in mind, because when we are actually setting up a trust, because we want to maintain privacy and obscurity, we do not even want people to know that it is a trust. So don't use the word trust if you don't have to. Next, when you are setting up or naming a family trust, some names that you might want to use is legacy and dynasty. Those are nice, solid names for the type of generational wealth that you are going to leave behind for generations to come. If you're naming a business trust, you can use abbreviations like LLC, Corp, Co, company. So also keep that in mind when you are naming your business trust. So now that you know the name of your business trust, you are going to appoint the different parties within this agreement. So the first party that you need to appoint is the grantor. The grantor is the person who is establishing the trust. But because you are setting up an irrevocable trust, you do not want to give yourself irrevocability. You want to be able to maintain power and control over the trust. So you are going to appoint yourself as the trustee, and you're going to appoint someone else to be the grantor. So that is going to be a person who is 18 years or older, who actually wants to serve as the grantor of your trust and who is able to notarize the trust. This individual can be a sibling, they can be a neighbor, a cousin, a parent, or a grandparent, or a complete stranger. That person doesn't have any power, control, or influence over the trust, so you don't have to worry about that person having some type of capital gains for your trust entity. Once you've chosen who your grantor is, just make sure that you are choosing an individual who is not going to be a part of your trust, because you don't want to lock them out of the trust. So how many grantors can you have? You can have an unlimited amount of grantors. Also, a grantor can serve as either an entity or a natural person. And that same thing goes for a trustee and a beneficiary. They can also be entities, other trust, or natural persons. So keep that in mind. So once you've chosen somebody to be your grantor, let's just say that it is your grandparent. Then you're going to appoint yourself to be the trustee of your trust. So you are going to have all the power and control and make the decisions regarding the assets of the trust. And lastly, you're going to appoint the beneficiary. The beneficiaries are your inheritors. So usually those are your children. So it depends on the type of trust that you're creating. If you're creating a business trust, we recommend that you put the beneficiary as your private family trust. So it can actually be another trust or entity. And then if you're setting up your private family trust, then you would want the beneficiaries to be your children. Next, you're going to appoint your successor. Your successor is going to be a successor trustee, or someone who is going to take over after you when you either expire, when you become incapacitated, or when you decide to resign. So your successor trustee, one, they need to be qualified, so they have to be 18 years or older. They also have to agree to operate the trust and agree to that position to serve as your successor. So after you've determined those different types of positions, then what you're going to do is you are then going to finalize your trust, okay? So you are going to create your actual trust agreement where you put all of the sections and provisions and the do's and don'ts of how you want your trust to be operated, okay? And we provide you with the templates that you need in order to actually set up your trust the right way that's going to be held up in court. After you've decided to set up your trust, you need to get it notarized. That is what makes it legal. It needs to be notarized by two individuals. One is the grantor or the creator on paper, and the second person is the trustee, which is you. So you guys both need to sign in front of a notary, and once it's notarized, it is completely legal and you're able to operate your trust. Once your trust is able to be operated, there are two things that you need to do. One, you need to open up a bank account. Before you open up a bank account, you want to have a board meeting about the type of bank account that you're going to open up. So let's just say you're going to open up a checking account with Truist. Perfect. So what you're going to do is you're going to have a board meeting about it, because the trust is not able to operate itself. It has an authorized representative, which is the fiduciary, which is you. So you are going to document in the board meetings that you are actually going to go to Truist, open up a checking account, and you are going to be the authorized user on that account and receive the login information and the debit card. Once you have had that board meeting, then you're going to take that board meeting with you. You're going to take your certificate of trust, which is actually the proof of identification for your trust. Your trust is over 50 pages. You're not going to bring it to the bank with you. So you're going to bring a summarized version, which is what we call the certificate of trust, which is also notarized, which serves as the proof of identity for your trust. You're going to bring that with you along with the 9-digit number associated with your trust. That can either be an EIN number or what we call a 98 number. Once you have those items, you're able to open up your bank account. Once you've opened up your bank account, then you have to fund it. One thing about a trust is that once you establish a trust, it needs to have a consideration. You need to add value to the trust, because the trust has what we call a corpus. That is the governing body of the trust, and you need to add value to that body. That value could be anything. So I recommend that you document $1 or even $100, but you need to add value to the trust. And when you are adding value to the trust, that money is coming from you as the trustee. So that money originated from either your business or your W-2 income, and that is what we consider a loan. You need to be paid back for that loan. So we're going to execute a promissory note representing that the trust is promising to pay you back $100 plus interest, let's just say 2%, in a 6-month term, so that you are able to get that $100 back. Once you've opened up the bank account, you're going to start operating the trust. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to transfer assets into the trust. That is so vitally important, because that is what is going to actually put you in a position to protect your assets. So for example, let's just say that you have a primary residence. That primary residence is in your personal name. That is a huge liability, because if somebody were to decide to sue you, they can actually get that property seized from you during a judgment. So you don't want that to happen. So what you're going to do is you're going to remove yourself from the public records as the owner or the individual on that deed, and you're going to put the trust as the new owner of that home. And the way that we do that is by utilizing a quit claim deed to deed over the property from our personal name into the trust name. Once you've executed your quit claim deed, then at that point in time, you do have to record it with the county. The county is going to update the public records to represent that the home is now owned by the trust. And at that point, that house is now going to be protected. So you are now going to operate the trust, because there are certain things involved with the operation of the trust associated with that asset. For example, the trust owns the house now. So the trust is responsible for everything financially associated with that house. For example, the mortgage payments needs to come directly from the trust. The utility payments needs to come directly from the trust. The taxes needs to come directly from the trust bank account, and any maintenance associated with it or anything associated with the property needs to now come from the trust account. So that is what operation of a trust looks like. You maintaining the financial responsibilities of the trust and the assets that are owned by the trust. Now let's talk about asset protection. That is the #1 reason why you want to set up a trust. To make your assets invisible from creditors trying to go after your assets and your growing wealth. The second reason why you want to set up a trust is to maintain privacy. You want what we call obscurity so that people are not able to know that you are associated with those assets. So what can a trust save you from? Well, you can be protected from bankruptcies, lawsuits, divorces, heavy taxation, probate, and foreclosures. So let's touch on a few of these. First is lawsuits. How can you be protected from a lawsuit? Well, let's just say that you own an asset, a house, for example, and you have a tenant in there. So you own this home in your personal name, you have a tenant, and now that tenant decides to sue you. Well, what is going to happen? They are going to sue you personally for the asset, and during the judgment, if you're not able to fulfill the judgment, then the judge can then go after your personal assets, forcing you to liquidate those assets. That's a dangerous thing. So you are listed on the public records as the owner of that home. I don't know if you know this, but if you go to the public records for your specific county and you put in your first and last name during a property search, every single home that you own in that county will show up, and vice versa. If you put in the home address, your name and contact information as the owner will show up. You want to remove yourself from the public records, and that's where the trust comes in, because the trust can take place as the owner of that asset, and now you're removed and no one can come after you personally, and now they're not going to know that you are truly the person who is associated with that home. Let me give you an example of a lawsuit. Let's just say that you have a business, an LLC. LLC stands for Limited Liability Company. And it sounds exactly what is in the name, limited liability. So that means that you don't have any liability and you don't have full liability. You're right there in the middle, which is risky, because if someone decides to sue your business, all they have to do is go to the Secretary of State's website, put in the name of the business, and the owner's information will show up. Once again, you're a part of the public records. And because you're listed as either the authorized member of that LLC or the manager, then they can contact you and come after you. So let's just say that the customer decided to sue the business, and you went through litigation and there was a judgment and your business is not able to fulfill the judgment. Then what happens? Well, that judge can decide to pierce the corporate veil. And if they decide to pierce that corporate veil in that specific state, then they can come after you personally as the authorized member or manager of that LLC. And if they come after you as the authorized member, what can happen is they can come after your personal assets, which means that they can freeze your bank accounts, they can garnish your wages, and they can seize your assets like your house and your car. You don't want that to happen. Like I said, don't wait until you're getting sued to protect yourself. Protect yourself now. So on the contrary, let me give you an example. If you were in a protected position, let's just say that that customer decides to sue your business. Well, then what happens? Well, the business is now owned by a business trust instead of you personally. If that business ends up in litigation and they have a judgment against them, and the judge decides to pierce the corporate veil, then they would go after the business trust. And you're not going to hold a lot of assets inside of your business trust just for that reason of the possibility of getting sued. So that is one example of how a trust can protect you during lawsuits. Now let's talk about divorces, because we know that a divorce is a transfer of wealth, and you do not want to be caught on the short end of the stick when it comes to that battle. So typically a divorce is between two people, a husband and a wife. And with that situation, it is actually a lawsuit between those two individuals, okay? And if you were to have a trust and you were to have assets in that trust, anything pertaining to that trust will not be pulled into that divorce proceeding, because the trust entity is a separate entity from you and your spouse. So let me give you an example. I have a client who, him and his wife decided to invest in real estate during the '08 bubble. And they were upside down on two homes, and she prohibited him from moving forward and buying more property. Well, guess what? Men don't listen. So with that being said, he actually decided to continue investing in real estate. He actually set up a trust, and throughout the years, he purchased 5 additional homes and put them into the trust. Fast forward 10 years later, husband and wife are getting divorced. So what is happening? Well, that trust plus the 5 properties in that trust is not included in the divorce proceedings, because the spouse does not own the trust and the spouse doesn't own those 5 properties in the trust. So only the properties that were owned by husband and wife, which were the 2 properties, are the only ones included in the divorce. So you can protect yourself from a divorce by utilizing a trust. And I highly recommend that if you're married, each spouse should have their own individual trust, just in case. Now let's talk about heavy taxation. A lot of us, we pay taxes, and some of us are giving away half of our income to the IRS. So how can we save on taxes utilizing a trust? Well, a trust can actually help you save taxes. One, because you as the trustee can determine what is considered income and what is not considered income. So that is profoundly possible, because if you decide that $100,000 came in, but only 50 of it is considered income, then you only have to pay taxes on $50,000, which is beautiful. Another thing is that because the trust is an entity, with this entity, the way that it is designed is that you are actually going to deduct your expenses first, and then you pay taxes on what is left over. So if $100,000 came in and you had expended 80,000 of it, then you are only going to pay taxes on $20,000, which is profound, right? And another thing is that with taxes, you are in a position to where you are an employee, and so they are actually withholding the federal taxes first, and then you get what's left over. So if you're a W-2 employee, and it depends on the type of trust that you're setting up, but if you have what we call a nonprofit tax-exempt trust, which is a ministry trust, then what you can do is you can donate up to 60% of your income to your trust, and you will only be taxed on 40% of your income. Did you hear me? I think I need to say that again. If you had $100,000 in gross income and you have a ministry trust, you can donate $60,000 to your ministry trust, and you would only be taxed on $40,000 versus the entire $100,000. Do you know how much money you would be saving? Thousands of dollars. So If you are a W-2 employee, you need to implement this tax saving strategy right away because it will help you reduce your tax liability. And so that return that you're getting at the middle of the year, you will then be able to apply that to investments and building wealth. I want you to save as much money as possible by saving as much taxes as possible. Now let's move on to probate. Probate is inevitable. All of us are going to end up in probate as long as we do not have our affairs in order. So with probate, if you decide that you are going to set up a will, your will end up in probate. Like I said, probate is inevitable, and there's only one way for you to avoid probate, and that way is if you have a trust. A trust will prevent you from going to probate, and a will guarantee that you end up in probate, and that's not a joke. So let me walk you through the probate process. For example, let's just say that you have a primary residence, you have a car, you have 6 figures in the bank, you have credit card debt and student loan debt, and unfortunately, you didn't wake up tomorrow. Well, what is going to happen with all of your assets plus your debt? It's going to end up in probate. And since you only had a will and you didn't have all of your affairs in order, then what's going to happen is the state where you reside is going to issue you an estate. So it's going to say estate of John Doe. And all of your assets are going to go into that estate. So the house, the car, and the bank account with the 6 figures in it. And now you have an estate. Your estate needs to be represented by a probate attorney, and it's going to end up in probate court because now it's going to be the judge's decision on what happens to those assets if they go to your heirs, which are your children, or if they need to be liquidated to pay for your debt. So I don't know about you, but I don't want to leave my growing wealth to the decision of a judge that doesn't even know who I am. So let's just say you didn't have your affairs in order and you dragged your family through that entire process. 1, your family is grieving. They just suffered a loss. And 2, now you're doing them a disservice by dragging them through that probate process, which could have been avoided. Now that they're in probate, what is going to happen is your debt is going to go after your estate. So the student loan company and the credit cards are going to go after your estate so that your estate can pay off that debt. So now out of your estate, the credit card's going to get paid off, the student loans is going to get paid off. The probate attorney fees is going to get paid, and the probate court fees is going to get paid. And guess what happens to the leftovers? Your family gets the leftovers. Your children gets the leftovers. And unfortunately, from what I've seen throughout the years is some families are not able to save grandma's house because the debt was so large that they had to sell the house to cover grandma's medical bills. So you don't want that to happen. On the contrary, what will happen is if you have your affairs in order, if you have a trust, and you decided not to wake up tomorrow, then there's nothing that's going to happen because your assets are going to stay intact because they're in the trust. So now your family gets to grieve properly, and that debt that you had, the student loan and credit card debt, that debt is going to die with you because those creditors cannot go after your trust estate because the trust is not you and you are not the trust. The trust owns that house, that car, and that bank account. So your student loans cannot come after the trust, which is a beautiful process. And that's the process that you want to set up to really have your affairs in order and to set up your family for generational wealth and wealth transfer. So now that we know how a trust can protect our assets, let's talk about the wealth building formula. So we have 3 pillars. We have structure, credit, and invest. Under the structure column, we have business trust, family trust, and nonprofit tax exempt trust. So let's start at the top with business trust. Your business trust, you are going to set it up. It's going to be an unincorporated business trust, and you can use it 2 ways. You can use it as a holding company in order to hold other entities and assets, and you can also use it to conduct business and replace it from having to utilize a LLC or corporation. So now that we are utilizing the business trust, let's just say we're utilizing it as a holding company and it owns the LLC. So now it's the authorized member of your LLC. Your LLC is going to remain intact and continue to operate business as usual. But now instead of it being owned by you, it's going to be owned by the business trust. And let's just say that your LLC generated $100,000. Well, because it's a pass-through entity, what it can do is it can pass through that income to its owner, which is the business trust. So now the LLC is going to do a K-1 distribution, distribute the funds to the business trust, and now the LLC is going to have a 0% tax liability. So now that $100,000 is at the business trust level. The business trust is required to file a 1041 tax return, and on $100,000, they would have to pay 37% in taxes. But what the business trust can do is it can distribute 100% of that money to the beneficiary, which is the private family trust. So now 100% of that money is going to go to the private family trust, and the business trust will then have a 0% tax liability. So now that that $100,000 is at the family trust level, what's going to happen is you're going to do your deductions. So you're going to expend as much as you can, because we spend the money first and pay taxes on what's left over. So let's just say that we expended 80% of that income, which is equivalent to $80,000. So now we have $20,000 left, or 20%. And so what you can do is you can donate that $20,000 to your nonprofit ministry trust. And at that point in time, your private family trust will have a 0% tax liability, and that $20,000 will go to the nonprofit trust because it is exempt from paying federal taxes due to the separation of church and state. So let's talk about the ministry trust. The ministry trust is a 508c1a designated trust. It is the only mandatory exception to not having to file for a 501c3 due to the separation of church and state. A 508c1a can be labeled as a faith-based organization, a ministry, a church, a convention, or for any type of organization that is either religious-based or educational-based. So with that being said, it is a nonprofit and it is tax exempt from federal taxes. You can also qualify to be exempt from state taxes, county taxes, city taxes, property taxes, and sales taxes, but you do have to apply for that exemption. So with that being said, this type of structure is the structure that you want to implement in order for you to, 1, have protection, but then 2, reduce liability so that you can build wealth faster. Let's move on to column 2, which we're talking about credit. So there's 2 things that you can do. You can establish corporate credit for your trust. primarily your business trust. So just like how you would establish business credit for a business, you're going to establish business credit for your business trust. And the way that you're going to do that is by establishing a credit profile and applying for net 30 accounts with these different vendors. So typically you want 5 to 10 vendors. And then at that point, you are going to generate a paydex score and you're able to qualify for higher lines of credit on the business side versus lower lines of credit on the personal side. So you want to utilize this strategy when you're building wealth because you want to be able to, one, leverage credit, but then two, you want to have two credit profiles that you can leverage. One is your personal credit and the second one is your business credit. So now at that point, because you can qualify for higher lines of credit, you're able to utilize those funds in order to build wealth. Another thing that you can do is, because you have a nonprofit within your structure, you can qualify for nonprofit grants, which is beautiful because then you can utilize those funds for the things that you need to do in order to grow the trust estate, okay? Now let's move on to the investment portion. So in the credit portion, we establish business credit, and let's just say you've built business credit with your business trust. Congratulations, you just got approved for a line of credit or a credit card for $50,000. What are you going to do with that money? Well, we're going to move on to the next column, which is invest, where I'll show you how to invest that money. So there's two investments that I recommend. The first one is an index universal life insurance policy. The second one is real estate. So let's dive into the first investment. With an index universal life insurance policy, it is an asset. A lot of people are unaware of the fact that a policy is a liquid asset. And with this policy, it's supposed to be utilized when you are living, not when you're dead. It has a lot of living benefits, and so we might as well use it now while we're alive. So I'm going to teach you how to use your IUL policy. First, you need to know that it is an investment. It is liquid, and the insurance carrier sees it that way. Second, you need to know that it's tax-free, so you can actually utilize it to save money. The third thing you need to know is that it mirrors the market. Because it has the word index in it, it actually mirrors a certain index. You can choose what type of index you want it to mirror. The best one is the S&P 500. So if the S&P 500 is doing 9%, then what the carrier is going to do is they are going to match that return and give you a 9% return on your cash value in your IUL policy. So the most important thing for you to know is that you can build cash value, which means that it will now actually grow and compound interest, right? So that is a beautiful thing because now this policy becomes an investment because you're earning interest on the money that you are putting into the policy. With this policy, because you're going to be utilizing it while you're living, what you want to do is you want to actually use it to pay yourself first. Yes, you heard me correctly. You need to pay yourself first. That's the first thing that you need to do when you are making this transition into building wealth the right way. We are so used to receiving our paychecks and paying ourselves last. Gone are those days because now we are going to condition ourselves to pay ourselves first. So usually what happens is when you receive your paycheck on Friday, you see that the IRS took their deductions, Medicare took their deductions, Social Security took their deductions, and if you have a 401k, those were also deducted as well. So unfortunately, you are left with whatever is left over, and that money is direct deposited into your bank account. And then what do you do with that money? Well, I know that you decide to pay your bills first. So you're going to pay your mortgage, your car note, you're going to put groceries in the house, you're going to pay your kids' tuition, and any other financial responsibilities that you have. And so let's just say your paycheck was $5,000, you've paid everything, and now you're only left with $2,000. Well, where does that $2,000 go? You either leave it in your checking account or you transfer it to a high yield savings account. That is the process that you go through. Well, I'm going to show you an alternative so that you can start building wealth the right way. And the alternative is when you receive your paycheck after everyone has done their deductions and you receive that $5,000, instead of you paying everyone else first, you're going to pay yourself first. And the way that that is designed is by you actually depositing that $5,000 into your index universal life insurance policy. So that $5,000 that you just made a payment to your policy is actually going to go into your cash value. And now your cash value has grown by $5,000. So what is going to happen with that cash value is it's going to accrue interest. That is the most amazing phenomenon, right? Because your policy mirrors the market, it's actually going to match whatever the S&P 500 is doing. So if it's doing 9%, then your $5,000 is going to earn 9%. So that means that you are paying yourself first because you decided to put that money into your policy and grow that money by 9%. But wait, that money needs to be utilized for our mortgage and our groceries. So what is it that we have to do? Well, the next step is after you've deposited into your index universal life insurance policy, then you're going to receive a disbursement or request a loan from your carrier. And your carrier is going to look at your policy. They're going to see what your cash value is. And because your policy is a liquid asset, they're going to approve a loan for the maximum amount. So let's just say that that amount is $5,000. They are going to either send you a check in the mail if that is what you want, or they're going to give you a direct deposit for the $5,000. So you are not removing the $5,000 from your policy, you are only borrowing against that. So the carrier is utilizing that as collateral, and what they're actually doing is they're loaning you the $5,000 from their money, from their reserves. So your $5,000 is going to continue to work in your policy, and now you get to utilize the $5,000 from your insurance company, which is beautiful. So now that they have direct deposited the money back into your bank account, you are able to cover your bills. You can now pay your insurance, your groceries, your car note, put gas in the car, and all of the things that you intended on using that money for. But wait, you said that that $5,000 is a loan, so when do I pay it back? That's a good question. You actually can decide to pay it back, and that will actually build up your cash value more. Or you can decide not to pay it back because it's not required. And the reason why it's not required for you to pay the loan back is because the insurance carrier will deduct it from your death benefit. So remember, you have a death benefit associated with this IUL policy. Let's just say it's $2 million. So if you decide not to pay back that $5,000 loan, then they're going to deduct the $5,000 from the $2 million death benefit. So that is the process that you're going to take when you are paying yourself first. With your IUL policy, the way that you design it is extremely important. And so what we recommend is that when you set up your private family trust, you have the trust become the owner of the policy, the payer of the policy, and the beneficiary of the policy. So in the event that something happens to you, the insured, then the death benefit is going to go to the trust. And remember, your children are the beneficiaries of the private family trust. So that money ultimately is going to flow down to them, which is the best process for you to take. Therefore, your Index Universal Life Insurance policy is going to be an asset within your trust. If you have a policy already, what you can do is you can contact your carrier and have them change the ownership and beneficiary information so that you can now have your trust become the owner of your policy. If you do not have an insurance policy yet, you don't want to set one up until you have set up your trust, because you want the trust to apply for your policy and be the initial owner of your policy, because there's a 3-year rule with the IRS that states that if you are an individual that owns a policy and you transfer the ownership of that life insurance policy into a trust and you expire within the 3 years, the IRS will have the authority to tax your death benefit, and you don't want to take that risk. So if you don't have a policy yet, wait until you set up your trust so that you can do things the right way, because it's super important for your Index Universal Life Insurance policy to be structured the right way so that you can actually build wealth utilizing it by paying yourself first. The next investment that I want to tell you about is real estate. Real estate is a tangible asset that you can utilize in order to grow wealth, and a trust can own real estate. A trust can own a house just like a natural person. A trust can get a mortgage just like a natural person. So what you can do is you can actually purchase rental property utilizing your trust. And you can do that by utilizing a DCR loan, which is an investment loan where the real estate rental property can actually be able to service the debt through that rental income. And the way that you would be able to acquire this property utilizing the trust is, one, that type of loan requires 80% down. And so where are you going to obtain the 20% down payment? Well, remember, in the second column within this wealth building formula, we decided to build business credit with our business trust. And we were approved for $50,000 in credit. So that is where we're going to obtain the $20,000 down payment that we need in order to acquire a rental property. So if you get approved for a DSCR loan for 80% and then you're utilizing a credit card or line of credit from your business for the other 20%, then you have just structured a deal to where you have acquired 100% financing and you didn't have to come out the pocket for any of the money to acquire this property. This is the ultimate goal, because you are going to be putting yourself in a position to where the trust is now going to have its own streams of income, and they're not going to have to worry about relying on your W-2 income or income from your business. So this is the way that you want to structure yourself. Now, let's rewind back to that $50,000 of credit that we were approved for. What we're going to do is we are going to either remove that $50,000 from the line of credit or strategically remove it from the credit card. Once the $50,000 is in our possession, where is the first place you're going to put that money? Well, Remember, we're in the business of paying yourself first. So you're going to park that money in your index universal life insurance policy first. That money is going to earn 9% or whatever the market is doing at that time. And disclaimer, if the market crashes, one thing with your life insurance policy is that it has a floor. And so that floor is either 0 or 1. The $50,000 is now in our cash value that has grown by $50,000. We're earning 9% on that money. We go ahead and borrow that $50,000 out of our policy, and now we're going to utilize it as a down payment for real estate. So we go ahead and acquire a rental property. So now we've acquired a rental property, and let's just say that we're making $3,000 per month. Where is that $3,000 going to go? Well, remember, we're in the business of paying ourselves first. So that $3,000 is going to be deposited into our insurance policy, borrowed back out, and then we're going to allocate money to the mortgage, to pay back our credit card, and then we get to keep the remaining cash flow. So now you have actually set up 2 assets or streams of income for your trust. Your trust is self-sufficient now and able to generate its own income, and you're on your way to building financial freedom. Let's move on to the next section, which is how am I going to transfer my wealth? Let me ask you a very important question. If you have a primary residence today and that primary residence is in your personal name, how do you expect that home to go from your name to your child's name or your spouse or your heir? Sometimes we don't think about this very important question. And so I'm going to dive into the best way for you to transfer wealth, because that way would require your children to go to probate. And that is not what you want. You want to avoid probate at all costs. And it is avoidable if you have your affairs in order and have a trust set up. Let's dive into how to transfer wealth. The first thing I want to tell you is you need to put yourself in a position to where you own nothing but control everything. That is one of the most important statements in this entire webinar. And I'm going to repeat it again. You want to put yourself in a position to where you own nothing but control everything. That is the true definition of stewardship. Stewardship is where you are a good steward of your wealth and you are guiding the wealth in the right direction. And you are putting stipulations and rules in place so that that wealth can last for many generations. And on the contrary, ownership is where you are a proud owner of an asset and you own that asset in your personal name. So out of these two phenomenons, we want to be on the section of stewardship versus on the section of ownership. So when we are transferring wealth, utilizing a trust, let's just say that you didn't wake up tomorrow. Well, if that were to happen and your primary residence was in a trust, there is no transfer that needs to be made because that trust owns the asset and everything is going to stay intact. The house is going to remain in the name of the trust and your children are the beneficiaries. So that is what it looks like when you are transferring wealth in that form. Now, on the contrary, if you were to transfer wealth without a trust, then you would have to go through the probate process. With a trust, we transfer wealth utilizing TCUs. TCUs stand for Trust Certificate Units. They are very similar to stock certificate units. So stock certificate units represent ownership in a corporation, and TCUs represent beneficial interests in a trust. So that is what is represented as ownership in a trust, but we don't use the word ownership because remember, a trust is a living entity and someone cannot own a living entity. So we cannot own a trust. With that being said, the trust certificate units are dispersed to the beneficiaries. The beneficiaries then become TCU holders, and however many TCUs they have is what represents their beneficial interest. So when we're setting up a trust, we are going to create 100 trust certificate units, and we are going to disperse those 100 trust certificate units to the beneficiaries. Let's just say that we have 4 beneficiaries. We can disperse the TCUs evenly between the 4 beneficiaries by providing 25 TCUs per beneficiary. Now let's fast forward. The trust has generated $200,000 and $100,000 is eligible for distribution. That distribution is going to be evenly distributed based on the number of TCUs that the beneficiary has. So if I am a beneficiary and I have 25 TCUs, out of that $100,000 distribution, I am going to be entitled to $25,000. So that is the way that wealth is transferred that way. Now let's say that the trust is terminated. It has reached the 100 years, and now at that point, the trust is going to be dissolved. If and when the trust is dissolved, the trustees would be required to dispose of the assets in the trust and distribute them to the beneficiaries. Let's just say that the trust has 8 houses and we have 4 beneficiaries. Then that would be equivalent to the trustee deeding over 2 houses per beneficiary at the point when the trust has been expired. That is what the process looks like if you were to transfer wealth. The next thing when we're transferring wealth is preservation of wealth. In order for your wealth to last for generations and generations, then you need to put spendthrift provisions so that the beneficiaries do not dissipate the wealth. Therefore, you're going to put provisions in place in order to preserve the wealth. The first provision that we put in place is that the trust is going to take out an insurance policy on everyone associated with the trust, meaning all of the trustees, all of the beneficiaries. You have to understand that you are a human asset when it comes to the trust. And because you are an asset, that asset needs to be insured. And if anything were to happen to that asset, then the trust needs to be compensated for that loss. So because you're a human resource, you are going to have a policy taken out on you. And in the event that you expire, then that death benefit is going to go to the trust fund account. And that is going to serve as replenishing the wealth. And the trust is going to be compensated. So that is one way that you can ensure preservation of the wealth. Remember, we said that every single member of the trust is going to be insured. That also includes the future beneficiaries. Once that beneficiary is 30 days old, the trust will insure that baby. Now, let's fast forward to when the beneficiary is 18 years old. Normally, what they would do is they would go to a dealership, run their credit, purchase a $30,000 car, pay a car note of $500 for 4-year term, and start paying the dealership. And so the dealership would now actually be accruing interest payments on that car loan. Now, on the contrary, what that beneficiary can do is, instead of going to the dealership, they can go to the trust and they can take out a $30,000 loan from the trust. And what would happen is the trustee would write them a check for $30,000 and execute a promissory note from the beneficiary to the trust, promising to pay back $30,000 plus interest of 2% for a 48-month term. And now the trust would receive that 2% interest payments for the beneficiary. So the beneficiary would then be required to pay a $350 car note to the trust versus a $500 car note to the dealership. So that is actually a win-win situation for the trust and the beneficiary. But let's say that the beneficiary decided to default on that loan. Well, what would happen? Well, it would actually be a risk-free loan. Why? Because the funds did not come from the trust fund account. The funds were actually borrowed from the beneficiary's life insurance policy. So what happened is the trustee took out a loan for $30,000 from the beneficiary's life insurance policy, and those funds were deposited into the trust fund account, and then the trustee was able to write a check for the $30,000 to the beneficiary. Remember, it's a risk-free loan because those funds are coming from the insurance carrier and they don't have to be paid back because they will be taken out of the death benefit. So what ends up happening is when the beneficiary expires, then that death benefit is going to go to the trust, and the trust is replenished or repaid back for that loan. And that is what it looks like when you are preserving wealth. And that is the position that you want to put your family in. You want to empower the generations to come and actually change the trajectory of your family by training your children to become trustees of the trust. Now, to conclude the Wealthy Trustee webinar, I empower you to do your due diligence and research and see if a trust is the best fit for you. The books that I recommend are What Would the Rockefellers Do?, where you would learn how to utilize a trust and an insurance policy. The Art of Passing the Buck, Volume 1 and 2, where you'll learn about trusteeship. Family Wealth, where you'll learn about operating a family office utilizing a trust. And the Complete Book of Trust, where you'll learn about the different types of trust. Now you need to ask yourself, what is it going to cost me not to set up a trust? Your average divorce is over $20,000. Your average lawsuit is tens of thousands of dollars. And how many thousands of dollars are you giving to the IRS? So, if you wanted to, you could actually save that money by setting up a trust and avoiding divorce, avoiding lawsuits, avoiding paying so much in taxes. This is a short video from one of our trustees that decided to take action, set up a ministry trust so that he could save on property taxes.
Well, kudos to you all. Again, Christina, it's been a wonderful experience. I've been looking at your videos on YouTube for a while, and there are a number of people offering trust these days, and I guess that's the big thing. Don't own anything, control everything. That kind of, I didn't say it correctly, but that is the sentiment. And so it seems like the playing field is being leveled now from the rich and people who weren't privy to this information. So thank you for being such a great asset to a community that didn't have this information. And you made it so simple. Thank you for the recordings. Thank you for the step-by-step instructions. Things that we can go back and look at. So we do appreciate you. And thank you, Mondo. That was a great explanation of infinite banking. I know a number of people are talking about that, but they make it so complex. and his presentation was nice and succinct and very informative. So this has been an overall great experience. I definitely will recommend you to others.
And here is another short video from one of our trustees that decided to set up a business trust, get restructured the right way so that he can avoid a lawsuit and actually reduce his taxation.
This was a very informative workshop. I went down this route. I mean, I touched on it earlier, mainly because of my son, and then I found out about you, and I hopped on the opportunity right away because well, anyways, the path I'm going on, trust is the next step. I've been studying different versions of foreign trust, this trust, and I guess at the end of the day, for people that have been doing this for a while, it is tough to find someone that would actually walk you through this stuff, because trusts are very simple at their core and extremely complicated, and you can do anything with them. And so to actually walk through with any sort of a semblance of knowledge and follow through is a breath of fresh air. So just in that, but I'm gonna do it. I'm a little hesitant on my business stuff just because I've been doing it for 20 years, and it's that paradigm shift, and it takes me a while. I have to mentally like process it first and say, okay, I'm doing this. This is going to be the way I operate. But, and again, this is just my take on things. I do not want my money in the banks. I want them out. I want them in something different. And so it's buy a piece of land or do this. And I'm open. I think it's a good thing. So between the trust and the infinite banking, I think it's great. So thank you.
Wow, what a testimony. Your trust is your new form of doing business. It can save you from heavy taxation, lawsuits, bankruptcy, divorce, and so much more. You want to treat this like a big business, like a Facebook or Amazon, not like a small mom and pop shop, because this will change the trajectory of your life and empower you to create generational wealth the right way. With our Wealthy Trustee program, you get 3 trusts: an unincorporated business trust, a private family trust, and a ministry trust, valued at over $15,000. You learn about tax saving strategies that will help you save thousands, valued at $42,000. You learn about how to build business credit with your business trust, valued at $5,000. You learn about how to transfer your assets into the trust to protect your assets, valued at $5,000. You learn about wealth creation and how to actually acquire assets utilizing your trust and invest the trust funds the right way, valued at over $8,000. You also learn about infinite banking and how to actually pay yourself first, valued at over $10,000. And you get access to our private Facebook group with hundreds of people, and you get generational impact, which is invaluable. So all of this is valued at over $95,000. So let's work together. With the Wealthy Trustee program, we have 3 offers for you. The first offer is Do It Yourself, which is our DIY course, where you get lifetime access to our online portal with over 42 video modules teaching you how to actually set up the 3 trusts, as well as the things that we previously mentioned, which is tax strategies, wealth creation strategies, how to transfer your wealth. You also get access to resources, which is all the templates that you're going to need to operate your trust efficiently, as far as the quick claim deeds to transfer properties and board meetings to conduct your meetings for your trust. You also get the ebooks, which are the books that I previously recommended in this webinar, for only $997. Our second offer is Done With You, where we will meet on Zoom for 5 Zoom calls. And that is going to consist of 5 workshops. It's going to be Monday through Friday from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On Mondays, we will set up the business trust together. On Tuesday, we'll set up the private family trust together. On Wednesday, we'll set up the ministry trust together. On Thursday, we will establish business credit, do our board meetings, and execute a promissory note for the amount we're starting our trust fund with. On Friday, we're going to apply for our EINs, transfer our assets, which could be a house, car, or business, and learn about infinite banking. This is going to be done in a group setting, and you get the support of myself, my team, and the other members within the group. With the workshop, you also get 1 private Zoom call after the workshop is done and after your trusts have been set up, plus lifetime access to the online course, all the resources and ebooks, and the Facebook community. So you get assistance directly from me and that sense of security to know that your trust is set up the right way, and for me to hold you accountable through the entire setup process. All for $2,500. The last offer is Do It One-on-One, where you get 5 private Zoom call sessions where I actually set up the trust for you. Usually this is for individuals who have multiple assets or a very unique business structure. You get unlimited support after the private Zoom calls, and you get that sense of security to know that your entire estate is set up the right way. That is at a cost of $5,000. Now I want to show you what an actual trust looks like. Here is the template for the unincorporated business trust. I want to show you what it looks like so that you know and understand what you will be creating. Here we have the title page. Everything that you see in red is what you will be filling out for this trust template. So this trust is 51 pages. Here we have the table of contents. And this is where we begin the declaration of contract. And this is where we begin the indenture. As I mentioned earlier, everything that you see in red under all of these sections and provisions is what you will be using as a framework to customize your trust to your specific business or family. Here we have the beginning of the signature page. So here is where the grantor will sign, the trustee will sign, and it will be notarized by a notary in that state and county. Here we have the Schedule A. Here we have the Schedule B, the Schedule C, the Schedule D, and the Certificate of Trust. All of this information is included in the course, and you will learn what all of these different schedules are. So here's my contact information. If you're interested in enrolling in the Wealthy Trustee program, visit wealthytrustee.com today.